Picture this. You're floating in the ocean at dusk, suspended in that strange twilight where the sun's last rays dissolve into deepening blue. Everything seems peaceful, almost serene. But beneath you, in waters stretching down into absolute darkness, something is changing. Not overnight, not dramatically, but with the patient inevitability of evolution itself. The ocean's predators, those masterful killers that have refined their craft over millions of years, are entering a new chapter. Climate is shifting, ecosystems are fragmenting, prey is adapting in desperate new ways. And when the rules change, evolution doesn't sit idle. It innovates, it experiments, creates monsters. Here's the unsettling truth. We think of the ocean as timeless, unchanging in its essential nature. But that's a human illusion born from our brief lifespans. To evolution, a few thousand years is nothing, a heartbeat, barely enough time to sketch the outline of a new predator. And right now, we're accelerating these evolutionary pressures at rates the ocean hasn't seen in millions of years. Warmer waters, acidifying seas, collapsing food webs, traditional hunting strategies, perfected over eons, are starting to fail. What happens when a predator's ancient playbook stops working? Does it go extinct? Sometimes. But sometimes it becomes something entirely new. Something we might not even recognize as a predator until it's too late. Consider what already exists in our oceans, right now, hunting in ways that seem almost impossible. The mantis shrimp, a creature barely larger than your hand, strikes its prey with appendages that accelerate faster than a bullet from a gun. We're talking about speeds of 23 meters per second underwater, generating forces up to 1,500 newtons. But here's where it gets truly alien. The strike is so fast, so violent, it literally tears the water apart, creating cavitation bubbles that collapse with the force of a miniature explosion. The prey gets hit twice, once by the hammer blow itself and again by the shockwave. It's a biological jackhammer wielded by something that could fit in your palm. Evolution didn't just give this creature strength, it gave it the physics of warfare. Then there's the cone snail, looking innocent, barely moving across the reef. Seems harmless, almost decorative, until it extends a proboscis loaded with a venom cocktail so complex, so precisely engineered, that scientists are still cataloging all its components. Some species use insulin weaponized to send prey into hypoglycemic shock. Others deploy nerve toxins that paralyze within seconds. The cone snail doesn't chase, doesn't struggle. It simply rewrites the neurochemistry of its victim, turning a healthy fish into a helpless meal. This isn't just poison. It's molecular warfare refined to terrifying perfection. These aren't science fiction concepts. They're not speculative nightmares from some distant future. They're hunting right now in our oceans using strategies that push the boundaries of what we thought biology could achieve. And they represent only what evolution has created under relatively stable conditions over millions of years. Now, imagine those same evolutionary forces but accelerated, compressed, driven by rapidly changing environments that demand adaptation or death. What new strategies might emerge? What combinations of existing abilities might fuse into something unprecedented? The question that should unsettle us isn't whether evolution will produce new predation strategies. It's what those strategies will look like. Evolution is ruthlessly creative when survival is on the line. It doesn't follow rules of fair play or aesthetic preference. It defines what works, however bizarre, however nightmarish, and it amplifies it. We've already seen glimpses. Predators that manipulate light, that hijack nervous systems, that strike faster than their prey can process sensory information. These are the blueprints, the proof of concept. Evolution has shown us the tools in its arsenal. Now it's being given unprecedented pressure to combine them, to push them further, to create predators we haven't even conceived of yet. Think about the deep ocean, that vast realm of permanent darkness where vision barely matters and sound carries for hundreds of miles. Down there, predators already hunt using electrical fields, chemical trails, and pressure waves. They've evolved to exploit senses we barely understand, navigating a world completely alien to our terrestrial experience. These creatures have had hundreds of millions of years to perfect hunting in absolute darkness. What happens when their ecosystems destabilize? When warming waters push species into new depth ranges, into contact with predators and prey they've never encountered. The deep ocean isn't a museum of ancient life. It's an active laboratory of evolution, and we've just dramatically changed the experimental conditions. So here we stand, at the beginning of something we can only dimly perceive. The ocean is transforming, and its predators are transforming with it. Not in our lifetimes, perhaps, not in ways we'll witness directly. But the process has begun, the evolutionary dice are rolling, and we've loaded them in ways we're only starting to understand. The peaceful ocean surface, glittering in sunlight or moonlight, conceals a world where survival drives innovation at scales we can barely imagine, where today's nightmare predator might be tomorrow's obsolete ancestor, where evolution is writing new chapters in blood and seawater, crafting hunters we won't recognize until they've already reshaped entire ecosystems. The transformation is silent, invisible, patient, but it's happening, and what emerges from these changing seas might be more alien, more terrifying, and more magnificently adapted than anything currently swimming in our oceans. Imagine you're a small fish, drifting through the absolute darkness of the deep sea. You haven't eaten in days, and your energy reserves are dangerously low. Then, in the suffocating blackness ahead, you see it, a soft, pulsing glow. It looks exactly like bioluminescent plankton, the kind you've fed on your entire life. Relief floods through your primitive nervous system. Food. Salvation. You swim closer, faster now, your mouth already opening to feed. But this isn't plankton. This is something far worse. The light isn't food. It's bait. And the moment you realize your mistake is the moment massive jaws snap shut around you, razor teeth piercing through scales and flesh. Welcome to the domain of the phantom hunters, predators that don't chase their prey. They seduce it. They deceive it. They make their victims come willingly to their own deaths. Bioluminescence, the ability to produce living light, is one of evolution's most elegant solutions to hunting in darkness. Right now, in our oceans, anglerfish dangle glowing lures from modified dorsal fins, the esca containing millions of symbiotic bacteria that produce cold light without heat. The anglerfish itself is so black it absorbs nearly all light that touches it, becoming essentially invisible except for that hypnotic, pulsing beacon. Prey fish see the glow and interpret it as food or safety, swimming directly into jaws lined with teeth angled inward, ensuring that once something enters, escape becomes physically impossible. But this is just the beginning, the prototype of what bioluminescent deception could become. Now project this strategy forward, into oceans transformed by climate change, where traditional prey patterns have collapsed and predators face unprecedented selection pressure. Evolution has already shown us that bioluminescence can be controlled with remarkable precision. Animals can adjust intensity, color, and even create complex patterns. Some deep-sea squid produce elaborate light shows, flashing different photophores in sequence. Others, like the cookie-cutter shark, create counterillumination on their undersides to match downwelling light, making them invisible from below except for a dark throat patch that resembles small fish, luring larger predators close enough for the shark to take its signature circular bite. These are sophisticated optical illusions, and evolution is nowhere near finished refining them. Imagine descendants of modern cephalopods, creatures already possessing the most advanced camouflage systems in the animal kingdom. Octopi and cuttlefish can change color, pattern, and texture in milliseconds, matching their surroundings with such precision they become essentially invisible. Now add to that ability the capacity for complex bioluminescent displays. Future predators might not just glow, they might project. Picture an octopus that doesn't simply hide, but actively creates illusions, bioluminescent patterns that mimic entire schools of fish, drawing real prey into range. Or worse, patterns that trigger hardwired responses in prey species, lights that pulse at frequencies known to attract mates or signal safety within a species. The predator becomes a puppeteer of light, manipulating the visual language of its victims. The horror deepens when you consider neural manipulation. Some prey fish use bioluminescent signals for communication, flashing patterns that mean "safe here" or "food source located." What happens when predators evolve to crack these codes? To speak the language of light that prey species trust implicitly? You could have predators that emit the exact bioluminescent signature prey uses to identify members of its own school. Fish swimming toward what they perceive as their own kind, only to discover too late they've been lured into a living trap. This isn't science fiction, it's a logical extension of mimicry strategies that already exist. Ant-mimicking spiders infiltrate ant colonies by looking and smelling like ants. Why couldn't future marine predators infiltrate schools by looking like prey in the language of light? Consider also the psychological dimension of bioluminescent hunting. In the deep sea, where food is scarce and predation pressure is extreme, many species have evolved to be attracted to or repelled by specific light patterns. Bioluminescence serves as a burglar alarm in some species, a bright flash meant to attract larger predators to scare away immediate threats. But what if predators evolve to exploit this? Imagine creatures that produce alarm signals not when threatened, but as hunting tools, creating false emergencies that draw curious or opportunistic fish into ambush zones. The predator doesn't just use light to attract prey directly, it manipulates the entire ecosystem's behavioral responses to light, turning prey's own survival instincts into weapons against them. Then there's the most disturbing possibility, hypnotic predation. We know that rhythmic visual stimuli can induce trance-like states in many animals. Some predators today use movement patterns to confuse or mesmerize prey. Cuttlefish produce moving waves across their skin that seem to hypnotize crabs and fish. What if future bioluminescent predators could refine this into something more potent? Lights that pulse at frequencies that trigger seizures in prey, or induce confusion, or even create temporary paralysis by overwhelming visual processing centers. The prey doesn't just swim toward danger, it becomes neurologically incapable of swimming away. Its own brain, hijacked by patterns of light it cannot ignore, becomes the predator's ally. This is the future of phantom hunting, predation where the line between hunter and environment dissolves completely. Where predators don't just live in the darkness, they sculpt it, painting false realities with living light. Where prey species must evolve not just better eyes or faster reflexes, but the psychological defenses against illusions crafted by millions of years of evolutionary arms races. The ocean's depths, already the most alien environment on our planet, could become theaters of deception so sophisticated we'd struggle to identify predator from prey, truth from illusion. And the most terrifying part? Evolution is already experimenting with these strategies. Every anglerfish lure, every bioluminescent display, every light-based ambush happening right now in our oceans is a rough draft, a proof of concept, a glimpse of what's being perfected in the darkness below, where phantom hunters are already learning to weaponize light itself. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're blind, suspended in total darkness where light has never existed and never will. You can't see, can't rely on color or shape or movement. How do you hunt? How do you find prey that's desperately trying to hide, buried in sand or tucked into crevices? The answer is one of evolution's most alien innovations. You sense the invisible. You detect the electromagnetic whispers that every living thing broadcasts simply by being alive. Every heartbeat, every muscle contraction, every nervous impulse generates tiny electrical fields. And in the ocean's depths, where vision fails completely, some of the most sophisticated predators have learned to read these electrical signatures like we read words on a page. But reading is just the beginning. The true nightmare is when predators learn to write in this language, to create false signals, to hijack the very bioelectricity that keeps prey alive. Right now, sharks are swimming through our oceans equipped with some of the most sensitive electroreceptors known to science. Gel-filled pores called ampullae of Lorenzini, scattered across their snouts and heads, can detect electrical fields as weak as 5 billionths of a volt per centimeter. To put that in perspective, a shark can sense the electrical field generated by a single muscle twitch of a flounder buried completely beneath sand from several feet away. The flounder can be invisible, motionless, holding its breath in perfect stillness. But it cannot stop its heart from beating. It cannot prevent the tiny electrical signals that accompany every cellular process. And those signals, infinitesimally small, betray its location to a predator that hunts in a sensory realm prey can barely comprehend, let alone defend against. Electric rays and electric eels have taken this further, weaponizing electricity itself. Electric eels can generate discharges of up to 860 volts, enough to incapacitate adult humans and stun horses. But recent research has revealed something more unsettling. These high-voltage blasts aren't just weapons, they're active sonar. When an eel strikes, it's not just stunning prey. It's using that electrical discharge to track fast-moving targets with extraordinary precision. The eel generates a high-voltage pulse that causes involuntary muscle contractions in nearby prey, forcing them to reveal their location. Then, during subsequent pulses, the eel tracks the conductivity signature of the prey's body, adjusting its strike trajectory in real time, even when the prey is moving rapidly through murky water. The prey is simultaneously paralyzed and illuminated, turned into an electrical beacon that guides the predator's jaws directly to its target. Now imagine this technology refined by millions of years of accelerated evolution in changing oceans. Current electroreceptive predators can only sense naturally occurring bioelectric fields. They're passive receivers, extraordinarily sensitive ones, but passive nonetheless. What happens when evolution produces active manipulators? Predators that don't just sense electrical fields but generate false ones, creating phantom signals that prey species interpret as safety or opportunity. Consider a future descendant of electric rays that can produce not just stunning blasts but carefully modulated pulses that mimic the bioelectric signatures of prey species themselves. Imagine a predator broadcasting electrical signals that say, in the language of bioelectricity, safe here, others of your kind nearby. Prey fish with electroreceptive abilities would swim directly toward what their senses tell them is a school of their own species, only to discover they've been lured into a trap by a predator speaking their electrical language. The horror deepens when you consider neurological hijacking. Electrical signals don't just move through water, they can cross directly into nervous tissue. Electric eels already use high-voltage discharges to remotely activate motor neurons in prey, causing involuntary muscle contractions that reveal hidden fish. This is transcutaneous neural control, the predator reaching across space to literally pull the strings of its victim's nervous system. Future predators might refine this into something more sophisticated than simple stunning. Imagine creatures that can generate precisely tuned electromagnetic pulses designed to trigger specific neural responses: confusion, euphoria, attraction. Prey that doesn't just fail to flee but actively seeks out its predator. Its own nervous system hijacked by electromagnetic manipulation it has no evolutionary defense against. There's also the possibility of electromagnetic jamming. Many prey fish use weak electrical fields to navigate, to sense their surroundings in darkness or murky water, essentially creating an electrical bubble around themselves that alerts them to obstacles and threats. What if predators evolved to generate interference patterns, electromagnetic noise that blinds these electroreceptive prey? The prey would suddenly find itself sensory deprived, unable to detect predators or navigate effectively, swimming blind through waters that should feel familiar. Or worse, predators might generate false obstacles, creating phantom electromagnetic signatures that herd prey into specific areas, into ambush zones where coordinated hunters wait. The electromagnetic environment itself becomes a weapon, a tool for sculpting prey behavior on a massive scale. Consider the metabolic cost of these abilities. Electric rays use anaerobic metabolism to generate their powerful discharges, depleting energy reserves rapidly. This limits how often and how long they can shock prey or deter predators. But evolution is ruthlessly efficient at solving energy problems when survival depends on it. Future predators might develop specialized organs with better energy efficiency, or symbiotic relationships with electroactive bacteria, or even methods of harvesting ambient electrical energy from ocean currents and geomagnetic fields. What currently requires exhausting bursts of power might become sustainable, allowing predators to maintain constant electromagnetic presence, broadcasting false signals continuously, creating permanent zones of electrical deception that prey must navigate at constant risk of manipulation. This is the nightmare of invisible predation, hunting that occurs in a sensory dimension most of us can't even perceive. We see sharks and rays as physical threats, creatures with teeth and size and speed. But their true advantage, their evolutionary masterpiece, is the ability to sense and manipulate forces that are completely invisible to us and to most of their prey. In future oceans, where traditional sensory cues might become unreliable and prey must evolve new detection methods, electroreception and electrogenesis could become the dominant predatory strategy. Imagine vast regions of the deep sea patrolled by predators that don't need to see or smell or hear. They feel the electrical hum of life itself, the bioelectric signatures that announce every heartbeat, every muscle twitch, every desperate attempt to hide. And increasingly, they learn to write in this language, to create false signals, to hijack nervous systems, to transform the electromagnetic environment into a hunting ground where prey's own senses become weapons turned against them. The ocean's depths already feel alien to us, but they're about to become hunting grounds for predators that operate in dimensions we barely understand, wielding weapons we can't see, speaking languages written in pure electricity and nervous impulse. And their prey, for all their evolved defenses, might as well be swimming blind. Here's a thought that should disturb you. What if the most dangerous predators aren't the ones hunting alone? Individual sharks, anglerfish, electric eels, terrifying, yes, but limited by the constraints of a single mind, a single set of sensors, a single attack strategy. Now imagine predators that think collectively, that coordinate with the precision of a military operation, that don't just hunt but architect their kills. Predators that actively reshape their environment, transforming entire sections of ocean into killing grounds tailored specifically to their prey's weaknesses. This isn't hypothetical. Orcas already do this, using coordinated wave washing to knock seals off ice floes, or creating underwater vortices to disorient herring. Dolphins cooperatively herd fish into tight balls before taking turns feeding. These are glimpses of what cooperative hunting can achieve. But they're just the beginning, rough prototypes of what evolution could refine into something far more sophisticated, far more inescapable. Intelligence is evolution's most dangerous weapon because it compounds over time. A faster predator is limited by biology, by muscle and metabolism. But a smarter predator can invent entirely new strategies, can learn from success and failure, can pass knowledge between generations culturally rather than waiting for genetic evolution. We see this in modern cetaceans, where hunting techniques are transmitted socially, with different orcapods developing distinct hunting cultures specialized for local prey. Some hunt seals, others specialize in sharks, still others target whales many times their size. These aren't instinctive behaviors hardwired into their DNA, they're learned traditions refined over generations. And in rapidly changing oceans, where traditional prey distributions are collapsing and species are encountering each other in novel combinations, this capacity for cultural evolution becomes a survival advantage that might outpace genetic adaptation. But coordination is only part of the nightmare. The truly disturbing evolution is environmental manipulation. Predators that don't just hunt in their environment but actively engineer it to maximize kills. Consider oxygen minimum zones, regions of ocean where dissolved oxygen drops to levels that suffocate most marine life. These zones are expanding as oceans warm and stratify, creating larger and larger dead zones. Right now, some predators have evolved tolerance for low oxygen, allowing them to survive in waters that would kill their prey. They patrol the edges of these hypoxic zones, waiting for prey to stumble into oxygen-depleted water where escape becomes physiologically impossible. Now imagine future predators that don't just tolerate these conditions but actively create them, herding prey into hypoxic regions or even cultivating low-oxygen kill zones through metabolic activity or by manipulating water circulation patterns. The concept sounds fantastical until you realize organisms already engineer their environments on massive scales. Coral reefs are built by tiny polyps over centuries. Kelp forests create entire ecosystems. Whales, through their feeding and excretion patterns, redistribute nutrients that sustain entire food webs. Why couldn't predators evolve to manipulate environments specifically for hunting? Picture coordinated groups herding vast schools of fish into progressively tighter spaces, into bays or underwater canyons where escape routes narrow. Then imagine those predators have learned that certain areas, due to geography or water chemistry, naturally debilitate prey. They're not just herding fish randomly. They're driving them into specific locations, into natural traps that the predators have learned to exploit through trial and error passed down through generations. There's also the terrifying possibility of chemical manipulation. Some algae blooms produce toxins that affect the nervous systems of fish, causing disorientation or paralysis. These blooms occur naturally under specific conditions of temperature, nutrients, and light. But what if predators evolved to recognize these conditions and learn to cultivate them? Marine mammals already demonstrate understanding of complex environmental relationships. They know where prey congregates, when migrations occur, how currents and temperature affect prey distribution. Future predators might develop symbiotic relationships with toxic algae species, encouraging blooms in specific hunting territories, creating zones where prey become neurologically impaired before predation even begins. The predators wouldn't need to create the toxins themselves, just learn to farm the organisms that do, turning entire sections of ocean into biological weapons. Consider acoustic hunting strategies refined to terrifying precision. We know that cetaceans use echolocation for navigation and hunting, producing clicks and interpreting the returning echoes with extraordinary accuracy. Some species produce sounds so intense they can stun or disorient prey. Sperm whales generate clicks exceeding 230 decibels, among the loudest biological sounds in the ocean. Now imagine coordinated groups using sound not just to locate prey, but as a herding tool, creating acoustic barriers that prey instinctively avoid or infrasonic pulses that induce panic. Multiple predators could surround a school, using precisely timed sound bursts to compress prey into ever tighter formations, controlling their movement with invisible walls of acoustic pressure. The prey wouldn't even understand what's hurting them. They'd just feel an overwhelming compulsion to swim away from certain areas, driving themselves directly into waiting jaws. The evolution of patience makes these strategies even more terrifying. Most predators today operate on relatively short timescales. Stalk, chase, kill, consume, repeat. But the most sophisticated hunters, orcas, and some dolphin species demonstrate remarkable patience and planning. They'll follow prey for hours, waiting for the perfect opportunity, coordinating complex multi-stage attacks that unfold over extended periods. Future predators with enhanced cognitive abilities might operate on even longer timescales, spending days or weeks manipulating environments and prey behavior before executing kills. They might drive prey toward specific locations over multiple days, waiting for tides or currents to align perfectly, for oxygen levels to drop naturally, for competing predators to leave the area. The hunt becomes less about physical prowess and more about strategic thinking, about creating conditions where prey has no viable escape regardless of speed or evasion ability. This is the future of architectural predation, hunting elevated to the level of ecosystem engineering. Predators that don't just react to their environment but actively sculpt it, creating zones of death tailored specifically to their hunting strategies. Intelligence and cooperation multiply the effectiveness of individual adaptations, turning scattered advantages into coordinated systems of predation that prey can't evolve defenses against quickly enough. And the most horrifying aspect? We're accelerating these evolutionary pressures dramatically. Warming oceans, acidification, overfishing, habitat destruction. We're destabilizing marine ecosystems at unprecedented rates, creating exactly the conditions where innovative, adaptable, cooperative predators have the greatest survival advantage. The ocean is becoming a laboratory for predatory evolution, and we've dramatically increased the intensity of the experiment. What emerges from this crucible might not be individual superpredators but collective ones, networks of cooperating hunters that don't just dominate their ecosystems but fundamentally reshape them, transforming entire regions of ocean into elaborate traps from which prey has no escape. The surface remains calm, the waves roll peacefully. But underneath, predators are learning to think, to plan, to build. And their constructions are made of currents and chemistry, sound and coordination, patience and intelligence. Made of death itself, carefully architected. What could be more horrifying than being eaten alive? Perhaps this being eaten from the inside, being transformed, slowly and inevitably, into something that serves your killer's purposes even as you still swim, still breathe, still think you're alive. Welcome to the realm of parasitic predation, where the boundaries between hunter and prey, between self and other, dissolve into nightmare. We think of parasites as small as parasitic worms or microscopic protozoans. But parasitism is a strategy, not a size class, and evolution has no ethical constraints about how far it can push this strategy. In our changing oceans, where traditional predation faces new challenges and evolutionary pressure intensifies, parasitic strategies might become not just viable alternatives but dominant forces reshaping entire food webs. And the forms they might take, the relationships they might forge, blur the line between science and horror so thoroughly you'll wonder which side you're on. Let's start with what already exists, because reality provides horror enough. The tongue-eating louse, Cymathoa exigua, enters a fish through the gills, attaches to the tongue, and proceeds to drain blood from the organ until it atrophies and falls off. Then the parasite attaches itself to the tongue stub and functionally replaces the tongue, allowing the fish to continue feeding normally while the louse feeds on blood and mucus. The fish survives, swims, hunts, but its tongue is no longer its own. It's been replaced by a living parasite that poses as an organ. This isn't a rare aberration, it's a successful evolutionary strategy that demonstrates something crucial. Parasites can integrate so thoroughly with their hosts that the line between the two becomes functionally meaningless. The fish's body supports the parasite serves the function of the tongue. Who is predator and who is prey in this relationship? Now extrapolate this strategy into future oceans under intense evolutionary pressure. Imagine parasites that don't just replace single organs but gradually infiltrate multiple systems. Start with a small crustacean that attaches to gills, compromising respiratory efficiency slightly but not fatally. Over generations of host and parasite coevolution, the parasite develops the ability to tap into the host's circulatory system more efficiently, taking just enough nutrients to sustain itself without killing the host. Eventually, it infiltrates the nervous system, not to control it completely but to subtly influence behaviors that benefit parasite reproduction. The host fish begins swimming to areas with higher concentrations of potential new hosts, behaviors it perceives as instinctive but which are actually being whispered into its nervous system by the organism living inside it. The fish becomes a vector, a willing carrier that spreads the parasite to its own species. The true nightmare emerges when parasites evolve to completely hijack host behavior. We have precedents for this. The hairworm that infects crickets and drives them to drown themselves so the worm can emerge into water to reproduce, or the parasitic fungus that turns ants into zombies, forcing them to climb vegetation and bite down on leaves before the fungus erupts from their heads to spread spores. These are terrestrial examples, but the ocean has its own behavioral manipulators. Some parasitic barnacles castrate crabs and alter their behavior to care for the barnacle's eggs as if they were the crab's own young. The crab's entire reproductive system, its hormonal balance, its instinctual behaviors have been hijacked to serve the parasite's reproduction. The crab still lives, still moves, still appears normal. But it's no longer reproducing its own kind, it's raising the parasite's offspring. In future oceans, behavioral hijacking could become a dominant predatory strategy. Imagine parasites so sophisticated they can alter host sensory perception, making predator cues seem like mating signals, or causing hosts to perceive safety where there is mortal danger. Picture schools of fish infected with parasites that subtly modify their collective behavior, making them swim into regions with low oxygen or high predator density, creating mass die-offs that the parasites survive and exploit to spread to scavengers. The parasites wouldn't need to kill their hosts directly. They'd manipulate entire populations into environments where death is inevitable, then use the corpses and the scavengers that feed on them to propagate. Each dead host becomes a dispersal mechanism, spreading the parasite through the food web exponentially. There's also the possibility of predatory symbiosis, relationships where the distinction between parasite and partner becomes so blurred it loses meaning. Start with a barnacle-like organism that attaches to a predatory fish. Initially, it's purely parasitic, feeding on the host's tissue and blood. But over evolutionary time, the parasite begins producing bioluminescent lures that attract prey to the host fish, increasing the host's hunting success. The fish tolerates the parasite because the benefits outweigh the costs. Eventually, the relationship becomes obligate. The fish can't hunt effectively without the parasite's lures, and the parasite can't survive without the nutrients from the fish. But here's where it gets disturbing. What if the parasite then evolves to influence what the host hunts, directing it toward prey species that benefit the parasite's reproduction? The fish thinks it's hunting, making its own decisions, but increasingly its choices are guided by an organism embedded in its flesh that has its own evolutionary agenda. The most terrifying scenario is network predation. Multiple parasite species working in concert to completely control host populations. One parasite species compromises the immune system, another alters behavior, a third manipulates reproduction. Each parasite specializes in one aspect of host hijacking, and together they create hosts that are essentially biological vehicles serving multiple parasitic masters. The host swims, feeds, even reproduces in ways that seem normal, but every action ultimately serves to spread and perpetuate the parasite network. And because each parasite species depends on the others for optimal host control, they evolve cooperative strategies, chemical signaling between parasite species inhabiting the same host, coordinated release of behavioral control compounds. The host becomes an ecosystem unto itself, a battlefield where parasite species compete and cooperate, using the host's body and behavior as tools and terrain. This is the ultimate dissolution of predator-prey boundaries, hunting that occurs not through tooth and claw but through infiltration and transformation. In future oceans, where warming temperatures and changing chemistry stress organisms beyond their physiological limits, parasitic strategies might prove more successful than traditional predation. Why waste energy chasing prey when you can reprogram it to serve your purposes? Why kill and consume when you can transform and exploit? The ocean's surface appears unchanged, waves rolling as they always have. But beneath, boundaries are dissolving. Organisms that appear healthy might be riddled with parasites subtly altering their choices, their perceptions, their very identities. Schools of fish swimming in coordinated patterns might be controlled not by individual decision-making but by parasitic networks orchestrating collective behavior for their own reproduction. And the most unsettling question: how would we even recognize this nightmare if we saw it? When predation becomes indistinguishable from partnership, when hosts serve their parasites willingly, when entire food webs are puppeteered by organisms we can barely detect, the ocean transforms into something far stranger and more terrifying than simple eat or be eaten. It becomes a realm where identity itself becomes fluid, where the answer to what am I might be more complicated, more horrifying, than any creature has ever faced. And evolution, patient and ruthless, is already sketching the blueprints. We've journeyed through the darkness together, explored phantom hunters wielding light as a weapon, invisible assassins manipulating forces we can barely perceive, architects of death reshaping entire ecosystems, and parasitic nightmares that dissolve the boundaries of self. Each strategy is terrifying in isolation, a glimpse of what evolution might craft when survival pressure intensifies. But here's the question that should keep you awake at night. What happens when these strategies don't evolve separately, but converge? What emerges when a single organism or a symbiotic complex of organisms combines bioluminescent deception with electromagnetic manipulation, cooperative intelligence with parasitic control, environmental engineering with behavioral hijacking? What happens when evolution doesn't just refine individual weapons but forges them into integrated systems of predation so sophisticated, so multifaceted, that prey has no conceivable defense? Welcome to the apex of evolution, the endpoint we're accelerating toward with every degree of warming, every disrupted ecosystem, every evolutionary pressure we're amplifying without fully understanding the consequences. The concept isn't far-fetched, it's inevitable. Evolution constantly produces convergent solutions, different lineages independently discovering similar adaptations because those adaptations work. Flight evolved separately in insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats. Eyes evolved independently dozens of times across unrelated lineages. Echolocation emerged in both bats and cetaceans. When a strategy proves effective, evolution finds it repeatedly, refining and combining successful traits across millions of years. Now compress that timescale. Accelerate the selection pressure. Destabilize ecosystems to the point where only the most adaptable, most innovative predators survive. You create conditions where convergent evolution doesn't just produce similar solutions in different lineages, it produces integration within single lineages. Predators that don't just excel at one hunting method, but command entire arsenals of strategies, switching between them fluidly based on prey, environment, and opportunity. Imagine a descendant of modern cephalopods, already possessing the most sophisticated camouflage and behavioral flexibility in the ocean. These creatures can change color, pattern, and texture in milliseconds, solve complex problems, demonstrate individual personalities and learning capacity that rivals vertebrates. Now add millions of years of evolution under intense pressure, with warming waters pushing species into new depth ranges and novel ecological interactions. This future cephalopod might possess bioluminescent organs capable of producing complex light displays, not just for camouflage but for active prey manipulation, creating illusions that draw fish into tentacle range. It might have evolved electroreceptive capabilities, sensing the bioelectric fields of buried prey, or even generating weak electrical pulses to confuse or herd victims. Its intelligence, already remarkable, could have expanded to encompass true planning capacity, the ability to assess prey behavior patterns and execute multi-stage hunts that unfold over hours. But the true nightmare is symbiotic integration. Why should one organism evolve all these capabilities independently when evolution can stitch together existing specialists? Picture a predatory complex. A large, intelligent vertebrate predator, perhaps a descendant of sharks or rays, serving as the mobile platform. Attached to its body, integrated into its skin and nervous system, are multiple parasitic or symbiotic organisms, each contributing specialized capabilities. Bioluminescent bacteria produce light displays controlled by the host's nervous system, creating lures or confusion patterns on demand. Electroactive symbionts generate and sense electrical fields, extending the predator's sensory reach into dimensions it couldn't access alone. Chemical-producing parasites secrete compounds that alter prey behavior or create confusion zones in the water. The host predator coordinates these abilities like a conductor directing an orchestra, each symbiont a specialized instrument contributing to a coordinated symphony of death. The integration goes deeper. Some symbionts might infiltrate the predator's sensory systems, processing information from their specialized receptors and feeding relevant data directly into the host's brain. The predator doesn't just control its symbionts, it perceives through them, extending its consciousness through a network of specialized organisms embedded in its flesh. When it hunts, it isn't acting as a single entity but as an ecosystem, a mobile collective of organisms that have evolved such tight integration that distinguishing individual from colony becomes meaningless. This isn't science fiction, we already see precursors in terrestrial systems. Leafcutter ants cultivate fungal gardens and maintain bacterial symbionts that protect their crops. Coral polyps host photosynthetic algae so integrated that coral biology depends entirely on the symbiosis. Why couldn't marine predators evolve similar relationships, but weaponized, turned toward hunting rather than agriculture or energy production? Consider also the informational dimension of apex predation. Modern cetaceans already demonstrate cultural transmission of hunting techniques, with different populations developing distinct strategies passed between generations through learning rather than genetics. Future superpredators might possess such sophisticated communication and memory that they effectively maintain libraries of hunting knowledge, extensive databases of prey behavior patterns, environmental conditions, successful strategies. Each generation wouldn't start from instinct alone but inherit accumulated wisdom refined over thousands of years. The predators would be conducting long-term experiments, testing hypotheses about prey behavior, documenting which strategies work under which conditions, continuously refining their methods based on collective experience. This transforms predation from reactive behavior into proactive science, systematic study of prey populations to discover and exploit weaknesses that might only appear under specific rare conditions. The ecosystem effects of such apex predators would be profound and far-reaching. They wouldn't just occupy the top of food webs, they'd actively reshape those webs to their advantage. Prey populations would face selection pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Visual camouflage becomes irrelevant against electroreceptive hunting. Speed provides no escape from coordinated pack tactics. behavioral unpredictability fails against predators that maintain detailed knowledge of prey psychology and decision patterns. The prey's only evolutionary response would be radical transformation, abandoning entire life strategies to adopt completely novel ones. This drives explosive diversification, rapid speciation events as prey populations fragment into specialized morphs attempting different survival strategies. Some might evolve to tolerate extreme environments where superpredators can't follow. Others might develop such bizarre body plans or behaviors that they essentially opt out of traditional prey categories. Still others might evolve their own symbiotic complexes, creating evolutionary arms races between predator collectives and prey collectives, ecosystems within ecosystems competing for supremacy. And here we are, standing at the threshold of this transformation, whether we acknowledge it or not. Every ton of carbon we pump into the atmosphere, every degree the ocean warms, every ecosystem we fragment or destabilize, we're rolling the evolutionary dice. We're creating the exact conditions where innovative, adaptable, multi-strategy predators have the greatest survival advantage. The ocean has spent hundreds of millions of years developing its current inhabitants through relatively gradual environmental change. We've compressed that change into decades. Evolution doesn't pause to ask if we're ready for its innovations. It proceeds, ruthlessly selecting for whatever works in the environment we're creating. And what works in rapidly changing, destabilizing ecosystems are predators that can adapt faster than their prey, that can combine multiple strategies, that can reshape their surroundings to maximize killing efficiency. The super predators aren't coming, they're already being selected for, right now, in waters we think we understand. We just won't recognize them until they've already emerged, until entire ocean regions are dominated by creatures so alien to current marine biology that we'll struggle to classify them, to understand their hunting strategies, to predict their effects on ecosystems we depend on. The ocean's surface remains calm, reflecting sky and clouds as it has for eons. But beneath, evolution is painting something new, something unprecedented in the scale and speed of its transformation. And what emerges from that painted canvas might be more remarkable, more terrifying, and more magnificently adapted than anything currently swimming in Earth's oceans. The age of the apex is beginning, and we inadvertently, brilliantly, catastrophically are its architects.